right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a Friday session, which we are going to do some actual action items, which is not our typical business, but yesterday was a long day, so we do have some action items. Our first item on the agenda is several items related to student discipline, and this includes both the OEP, the discipline report as required by state law, but then also the report from the task force on discipline. So Courtney Salas-Ford is going to lead us through this. Thanks, Ms. Salas-Ford.
Good morning, Courtney Salas-Ford for the department. As you will recall, last month the State Board's task force or subcommittee on student discipline brought to you a draft report for your review and input. Several of you made very good and meaningful comments and suggestions, and so I attempted my best to incorporate many of those into the report, into a report that all of you could be supportive of and to move forward with your recommendations. I won't go through each of them. However, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those. And then we are just seeking your adoption of this report.
Very good.
I think oh, excuse me.
Can I start with Ms. Moore? Come this way, and then, okay. All right, Ms. Hook.
You can't see them and I can. I thought it was interesting that the OEP report a couple or 3 years ago came pretty much to the same conclusion, that it wasn't discrimination necessarily or disproportionate within a building, but I mean it was within a building, not between buildings. Mm-hmm. So it was like in a district, if you were white, Hispanic, African American, male, female, whatever, the discipline was equitable. Mm-hmm. But it might be different over in this other building, in this other school, or this other district. So I think as an educator, it makes me happy to know that we're not discriminating within those things with whom we have control. So that was uplifting. Thank you, Sarah.
Well, it's interesting because I don't see as happy news there when there are those kinds of disparities across the state. It does feel, district by district, it does get worrisome in terms of how much local control or local decision making is really driving some patterns that do affect all students in similar ways. But that's what's, I think so. We have this grand tradition of local control, but on this issue where we know kids are being treated differently based on where they just happen to have been born or going to school, it's very, very problematic. Is that we know they're not getting the same type of educational experience, and it may be doing some of them real harm in terms of being excluded from school or right. Corporal punishment or other things.
Well, if I made you think I was insinuating I was happy that happened. No. But I was pleased to know that if I'm the same child in the same building, no matter what my race or gender, then I'm going to get the same thing done or imposed upon me as far as discipline concerned as someone who's totally different from me. Local control is local control, and maybe bringing attention to it would be helpful. Maybe the suggestions of something else and different to do. I know a board member who I visit with frequently, they were talking about what are some suggestions about what you can do other than out of school and all of that. And so we sort of brainstormed and came up with it, and they have incorporated that now within their board. So it may just be a matter of conversation and bringing people's attention to it. Sometimes people don't know what to do, and they just react in the moment rather than planning ahead. Ms. Newton's husband was the superintendent of a district, and so she might have also insights into, how you get all of that to happen. or Ms. McFedridge, who was on the board.
Ms. Newton, I'll come to you.
One of the things that, as I read the report, that I wish that we could do, because going with what you had said, Ms. Sook, in the moment, sometimes it's hard to think of those other ways. And so, I know one of the things that the Family Engagement Task Force is working on is a toolkit for teachers and districts to have. And I really wish that we could develop some sort of toolkit for schools that would give them an idea of some other things that they could try, and that way it's readily available, in that moment. And then also something along that lines for parents also, if we could do that. I think that would be very helpful to sometimes you just get busy having school. And when you get busy having school, that's all you can think of, and it's hard to get outside that box that you've always been in. And so if you had some other incentives or things there to at least jog your mind that this was available, I think that would be helpful for districts.
Any additional, Dr. Hill?
Yeah,
And thank you and Ms. Dean and Ms. Salas for it, and all the advocates who were involved in this for getting us to this point.
yeah, thank you. No, I think everybody knows where we're trying to go, and it's a very difficult situation, and particularly for teachers and having a mainstream education, mainstreaming everybody, and not to distract the mainstream of education. And when you have somebody disturbing that, what I'm hoping that we're driving towards during the next 5 years that I'm on the board is that we start looking for intervention rather than reaction, because what can we do, because as she's mentioned, as a teacher or a principal, and you're starting to respond to every situation, and it starts taking time away from the educational environment, and then you get frustrated. And as I made this to and maybe not everybody doesn't agree with this, but as I referenced this to our commissioner in our meeting, as I go around and visit our priority schools and looking at the behavior issues that we're having, which are leading to extreme violence, and sometimes, particularly in urban education, more so than rural education, I see that we actually it's pushing us to really a three-pronged approach. Can you be educated in the mainstream environment? If not, let's try, as Ms. Lori Lamb, in the education environment where we continue to educate you in that environment, because the worst thing we're doing for our communities is putting you on the street and not educating you, and then we're seeing the violent tendencies take place. But we can't keep you in the mainstream environment because you're disrupting the educational process. So then we put you in alternative, and then, well, you're still struggling right there. And I think we heard Mr. Poore mention yesterday, which we've talked about on many occasions, is the restorative justice piece of education. So now I think there's three-pronged approach to this, that we have to look at what category do you fit in. We hope that you can be mainstream, but that may not be the case because of, you may not have a support system at home. And then when we put young people out of school, where do we think they're going? To the library? Once you've been put out of school, and so now you go out of school, and so if we put you in alternative education now, and I mentioned May 17th, I think we know when a student from Little Rock Hall was suspended, and he went and shot one and murdered and shot two other people. But what would have happened if we put him in a mainstream, in an alternative environment with somebody who cared about him rather than sending him to the streets? And that last piece, the restorative piece, is that for the extreme situation that, hey, this is your last chance. And from that point, we may consider driving them and dropping them off at the jail. I'm just because when we're putting them out on the streets, look at the results. And I mean, I know that's extreme, but if somebody in your family is murdered because we put somebody out, that's extreme too. So we got to look at the total picture of what we're doing with our students, and that's what we're trying to do. And this is very difficult. Lastly, I'll say this: in making those decisions, I think a major component is understanding and being sensitive to where the students are coming from. I mean, can you empathize with that situation? I mean, some people, you get upset because some people are late for school. Well, they can't drive. I mean, you know, so now they don't get the homework, and now we're punishing them. You know, it's different if you have a car and you drive and you can be on time and you woke up late. Yeah, you go to D Hall. That's my boy. You go to D Hall. Okay, you deal with the consequences. But if you have no car, your dad can't drive because he doesn't have a driver's license because he's behind on something. Okay, he couldn't get his deal, and that's what I mean, it's a very, very challenging situation that we're dealing with, and suspension and expulsion, to me, is the restorative piece of education, and then from that, then you're dangerous, and that's and let's rehabilitate through the programming of Arkansas Community Correction.
And I think
I think Ms. Dean wants to pop in.
oh, I'm sorry.
And that's where, on my end, the family and community engagement steps in, because there's got to be relationship there. There's got to be partnership between the families in the community and those that are educating, so that we don't get to that point. Because you know that child, you know what's going on in their home, because you've made your school a welcoming environment. The parents feel comfortable coming to you. They feel comfortable coming inside the building. They don't feel intimidated. They don't feel unwelcome. So that part of discipline is it's important not to miss that family and community connection. And so that's why I'm really glad to have you. Yes, to be on the team. So.
I think too, when we get the reading part, the academics up, so you feel some success when you go to school.
Absolutely.
And there too, get the family involved, you know. But I think that when you're analyzing a problem, you have to look at all the steps that get you to where you are. And, you know, there are districts that require home visits. You know, that's terrific. So you at least know, you may not build a relationship, but at least you're aware. And then getting the academics underway will encourage the kids to want to come to school. And also, you know, I can't emphasize enough getting them involved in extracurricular activities. And I don't care if it's the arts or the athletics, you know, some kind of extracurricular, because if they're busy, they're less apt to, they want to come to school, and they're less apt to get into trouble while they're there.
Great. Ms. Fetridge.
I have to make sure Ms. Zip can hear me this morning. Now, I've just seen a lot of improvement in being proactive in our classrooms and really modeling behavior, but also putting students in groups and interacting with one another. And they're given a situation, and what do they say to each other so it doesn't, you know, explode into a huge argument or a huge fight or a disagreement. And I think that is really helping a lot. And I apologize, I can't remember the name of the program, but there's a specific program that's in our schools that really encourage this. And I've seen it modeled, and it's amazing how much the kids are learning, just how, like I said, how to deal with each other, different viewpoints, how to appreciate different viewpoints. And I think if we can work more on that, that would really help a lot as well.
Let me also just throw in there, later you'll see in our community and family engagement, we have a culture piece that's really ties back into the discipline. I don't want to talk a lot about that but culture, the culture of the classroom, culture of the school building, the culture of the staff, the teachers, along with partnering with the parents is extremely important, vital part of this as well.
So, getting to the report, which is our action consideration. So, I think what I've heard up here today, I think we're all in consensus on the first item, which is really this: that there needs to be less reliance upon exclusionary practices. I think that's just obvious at this point, and so, you know, the specific takeaways here is identifying these alternatives, because I think what Ms. Zook said earlier, you know, more shining more light on it, we hope and trust will lead to a change. But I think we've shown a lot of light on these issues, and we have seen some change in certain areas, but we still are seeing, the light's not come on in certain districts in the state. And so I guess my question is, what can we do, recognizing that there is local control in this area, what can we do that would actually create equity across the state in terms of these issues of discipline? Because I'm just not trusting that shining the light is going to reach certain points. I think Dr. Moore, but then I hear Ms. Oak too.
Well, I was going to say I was glad to see a lot of partners listed in the report that are already working on this issue and can be in the future. Particularly, we're talking about impacting across the state higher ed and getting pre-service programs on board for building level administrators and for college students being teachers. I'm not sure across the state what students are learning in those programs, and that's a great way to impact, again, equally across the state.
Yes, sir.
I think it would be interesting, we had that terrific presentation by the principal from Stuttgart, how she had just decided, I'm going to study the kids, and there were, I think, 23 that are, and what's the deal with them, what's going on with them. And, we have access to so much data now. And a lot of what OEP and the other groups do is, study and extrapolate the data. So, are these kids getting in trouble when there's a substitute? Are they getting into trouble in the morning, the afternoon? Are they getting into trouble, or, have I checked to see if there's some problem going on in the home, or maybe there's a divorce, maybe there's abuse? Just trying to narrow it down and be purposeful about studying the kids and who's getting in trouble the most, and can we draw any inferences from one to the other to the other to the other? So, I've sparked something in Ms. Chambers.
You did. I agree, and I would take that analogy to the districts, the schools themselves. I think local control is harder. I think local control is better. And it requires different solutions for different schools and communities to the things that Ms. Dean was saying. I think, as I've been listening, and I agree with all the comments, the one thing I worry about is that we've not yet elevated this to what I believe is going to be a sustained, significant need. It's not big enough or understood consistently enough across the state. It's not a task force. Thank you to the task force, but the initiative is bigger than that. And making sure that we've institutionally approached it with the right resources and communication and focus over a sustained period of time, I think is going to be essential. And I think those resources, contemplating that one size will not fit all, you can push data out that will not, and we need to do that, but it will be insufficient in reaching every community in the way that it's going to need it. And so I would just ask, especially as the task forces work so hard and so closely with this, that we continue to listen for how might we go about that so that we really are reaching everyone that you were speaking to, Dr. Barth.
A question for the commissioner. In terms of education service cooperatives are mentioned in here as a delivery mechanism, and I think it does hit at your point that there is diversity across the state, and those delivery mechanisms are kind of closer to the districts that are affected. How much autonomy do those cooperatives have? Can this board or can the department say to those cooperatives, we in this case, we are mandating that every year you are providing tools to reduce disparities across district and within schools on disciplinary practices, and using more restorative approaches rather than more exclusionary approaches?
Yeah, so I think the way I would answer that is the approach that we're taking is more holistic than just helping them develop support on disciplinary, because disciplinary fits in with the rest of the work that we're doing with the co-ops and bringing them into how do we support schools under the new ESSA model in this continuous cycle of improvement. We know that some of the factors that impact their ESSA school index is going to be, how do you deal with discipline? How do you deal with the kids that you're moving out of learning environments? And what are other ways you can do that? So we've been actually bringing the co-op teams in, working with us on that that more holistic approach. And as we've reorganized, restructured units within our agency, it's really putting all the pieces on the table, so that, and in our work with principals too, in our work with Dr. Hernandez and his group, Rocky Malone, the leadership quests, really it's about getting principals to, as Ms. Zook, you mentioned with the principal from Stuttgart, thinking more thoroughly, more critically about all those pieces. So, I think we mentioned maybe a month or two ago, talking to you about and maybe bringing a presentation on high reliability schools. Well, the first element of a high reliability school is a safe and orderly environment and collaborative. So, that has an element of the disciplinary piece and how do you deal with that. So we are ramping up internally with our own ability to bring all those pieces together. And that's why we've tried to, in working with this group and with our discipline committee, talking with Dr. Abernathy, the School Board Association, about bringing them on board in some of their support elements, like superintendent mentoring. How does this relate to superintendent mentoring and having superintendents to think differently about some of these elements within their leadership? So really it brings all of the pieces together that we're working on, because it does, as it mentions here, academic success of the student. Under ESSA, I think we have a better opportunity to bring all of those conversations and coalesce them into just that holistic view of what are you doing in your school to meet all of these needs. And Ms. Dean, your mention of family and community engagement, that's a part of it too. I mean, that's where some of the Stuttgart work came from. So as far as mandating to the co-ops, this is what we want you to do, I'm not sure I would put it in those terms, but in terms of creating that support network and working more closely with them on what they can do as an extension of the department's work, I think is something we definitely are in conversations about.
Thanks, because I do think there's some opportunities there. And mandate was just the first word that came to mind.
No, I understand. Well, but
It's
that's
asking what it is, I guess, but I couldn't think of a nicer way to put it.
well, but now, and it's not a wrong word, but it's something that as we are issuing grants, we issue grants to co-ops and other support organizations, partner organizations. And as we issue those grants, that's an element of measures of success that in the past, there has, frankly, had not been a lot of accountability built into those grants. We are building accountability into those grants now to say, look, if we're going to send you this money for these programs, you have to show us that it's being used and having success. And if it's not, why not? And if we need to make some changes for the next grant cycle, that's what we need to do. So it's using the levers that we have without really putting on mandates, but it is, hey, if you want this money, these are expectations that we have for moving the needle on these issues.
Ms. Chambers?
I just have a general kind of request of us as a board related to this topic, but not limited to this topic. And as we've been talking about a board, how do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we understand the value we contribute? And I think one of the things that we can do is be very conscious and intentional about how we spend our time. Because I loved your term, Commissioner, about holistic, and I think that's right. But there are certain things within the whole that I think require additional pressure or focus from us, just because there's so much going on. It doesn't mean folks aren't intending to do the right things. I think they are, but maybe one of the things we can do is figure out how often should we be looking at this, and how do we look at it to measure, are we moving the needle? Is it making a difference in a way that we think is important? And I don't mean to take this out of context. I'm asking that we be intentional about context as we go forward.
Are there additional comments? So what I am assuming this report is approved or accepted, there certainly is a clear directive or request to the Task Force on Family and Community Engagement, and it sounds like that work will continue in that way. So that's, I think, an important piece here. There are some requests for new information to be provided to schools to shine the light more brightly on some of these issues, right? Both through the co-ops and through normal department communications methods. Do all of these things seem doable? Really asking the department, does this all seem, everything that's in here that is
Yeah,
asked?
it's doable, and some of these things are not necessarily new things,
Right.
even within the first set of recommendations. I think we really have started working towards some of those already. So,
Right.
we are comfortable with all these recommendations and moving forward with our ability to meet the needs.
Well, and just to your point, Dr. Barth, we are already looking at the state laws on discipline, what is mandated, what's not, what could be changed to align with the recommendations, and then as Commissioner Key said, how this incorporates with the levels of support being provided to districts, what kinds of support and training we're providing to school districts, and then the ongoing work of looking at data, identifying best practices. And so certainly anything that is a directive of the ADE is something we're already doing and will continue to do.
One thing that we might think about too is every month there's an education caucus where the people from the education committee that are senators and legislators, I don't know if it would be appropriate for us to ask to be able to present this so they are aware. And, because the more people that are aware, and I don't know, I'd leave it up to the commissioner who, was a senator to know whether this kind of request from the state board to present something or not. I don't know how they decide on their program. But if that is appropriate and wouldn't be overstepping, I think to present that information, whether we just hand it out and have questions or however we do it, but Dr. Hill, what is your...
You're exactly, because the commissioner has checked me a couple of times on what the law for getting things done have to be approved by the government. We have to make sure what we're asking is in compliance with the law. And we can't overstep the boundaries because we think that's a good idea until it goes through that process to being approved. Is that correct?
Right. And I think the Education Caucus being a more informal setting is very appropriate. And certainly, I mean, you all as a board, you're I think Senator Clark set that up for all stakeholders. State board is definitely a stakeholder in education. It's not it's really to bring the legislative branch and other groups together there to have a more informal conversation. So I think this is fitting for that, and I'll certainly ask him if he would consider adding this at some future meeting.
Because I think several of us might be able to go, or even if not people from the department, but I don't want to add work to what they're already doing, but it's an hour-long meeting, and, you know, you could present this and give them food for thought, or send it ahead and see if they had questions,
Yeah.
however works best for
Well,
that
that's a good idea.
particular group.
Yeah, and Dr. Barth, I would just say too, the Legislative Black Caucus, discipline is an issue that is a key issue for the Legislative Black Caucus, and has been for a number of years. And it's not uncommon for us to get questioned in a committee meeting, you know, about discipline, or about what are we doing about those types of issues and disparities. So I think all the members of the legislature that are concerned about this issue would feel, you know, a level of some relief, appreciation to know that, you know, this board is concerned and wants to take action to help alleviate some of these issues out there. So I think it would be
If we went
appropriate.
to the caucus, would they then say, we'd like this presented, as, you know, informational presentation to the joint ed, and do it that way, or do you all ever ask to be able to present a particular thing to joint ed?
Yes.
All of the
I mean,
above?
all the above, yeah. I mean, it's, there are multiple ways that topics like this come to the agenda. So we'll work with.
I think that's a great idea, Ms. Hook, and I think you've identified 3 different points of entry into the process, and I don't know that they're mutually exclusive, right, in terms
Right.
of, so I think that's a very good.
Do, Ms. Dean and Dr. Hill, do you all believe that it would be good at any point from this point forward, or do you think you need to do more as far as coordinating with the community engagement piece, or this can stand alone? I don't mean stand alone forever, but I mean stand alone in a presentation.
Yeah, you didn't ask me, but I think it does stand alone.
Okay, well, I asked them because they're on both
Yeah.
committees. They're on discipline and
I
community
think that's
engagement,
that's a
so.
whole separate issue. I think there's so many pieces over there that work needs to be presented, needs to be brought to light as well. No,
I wasn't being fresh.
No, I wasn't saying you were. I think there's media, especially with the combination of the OEP report and the data there, and the report from this this task force. I think that's a good package of good information for presentation and
I
discussion.
see Dr. McKenzie out in the audience, and
Yes, I
she,
meant to recognize you.
yeah.
And Dr. McKenzie will be presenting the OEP report and data once you guys consider the discipline report.
Yeah, okay. Okay, but we put them together because the OEP data obviously informs the discipline report.
Yes.
Okay, so before you is this report. I want to ask one question. On number 9 on page 2, the students in juvenile correction facilities, students who are insiders, what's going on there in terms of that coordination work between Department of Corrections and the department? That's the piece that I just don't know what's underway there in terms of new plans.
Which says should work, it didn't say, I mean, we're not, you know, that's the plan, is that, Ms. Lamb, as we talk about, you know, a person that's out, that gets suspended or expelled from school, that we would work collaboratively, and we would collaborate with them to keep the education process going. So, you know, because what I love about what she's saying, this is the only time that you can get put out of the education process is when you put out of school. And so,
Well, I was talking about the department, when students are incarcerated in the Department of Corrections.
So I can speak to, at
Okay.
least in terms of special education, our special education unit is already working with schools that have these facilities in their districts, and the partnerships between the school and the governance of the facility, who provides the education, how it's provided, and working on ideas to make it more consistent and more fluid and more continuous. And I believe that part of this recommendation is to expand that beyond the special education students to all students, because even though many of them are, of course, not all of those students have disabilities, and it's important to make sure that they all have that continuum of education.
Also, within the districts, the courts have a person that's a coordinator called in charge of FINS, which is Family in Need of Service. And before a student, typically, not if he just comes in and blows up and does something really bad one day, but typically that FINS coordinator works between the criminal justice system and the school to begin working with the family and begin working with the student. And so it very rarely is it just like you're in school one day and you're in prison the next. It's, you know, there are people that work through those things, even out in every county has those kind of people connected with their juvenile justice system.
And I think what Ms. Lamb, the reference is that if you have a teenager that's been placed in a juvenile correction facility, that we will work to make sure that person continues to get education, whether it's online, some type of instruction, rather than that person going and getting a 6-month sentence and have no education, tutoring or learning during that expulsion time.
We used to have teachers like at Tucker and those different places, do we not still?
Yes. Yes, but it's increasingly difficult to staff those. I mean, at DYS, I think maybe it was over the summer, back in the spring. Anyway, and I'm going to look at Stacy to make sure I say this right, but they signed an agreement with Virtual Arkansas to deliver education services. That's one of the co-op partnerships. So there's an element of this already happening. The issue I think we have to tackle is the continuity. The continuity from when they are adjudicated to when they begin this, and then if they get to go back to a traditional school setting, their records, their grade, all those things that I can't sit here today and tell you we have a good handle on, that the continuity is where it needs to be. So that's something that we view here as opportunities for work with DYS and Department of Corrections.
Yeah. And I think that's crucially important. First, we have constitutional responsibility to provide education no matter where students are, but then also that we know how important in terms of reincarceration, staying on track in terms of one's education, how important that is. And so I think that is just a crucially important piece, and I think we need to elevate that in terms of our commitment. And so however we do that, I think I just wanted to kind of elevate that part of the report, because I think it's really, 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 really important. And then finally, on the very last point, on mental health services and school counselors and social workers, I think that's also very important. And in terms of I've had some conversations with folks on the School Safety Commission about that issue, but did y'all have a sense of where that piece of the School Safety Commission's recommendation is going? The mental health services counselors?
I don't right now. I mean, I know that was a piece out of the initial recommendations the governor really picked up on as it related to counselors and general school services. And we are looking at the statute. I mean, it's 20-something years old. So we are in the process of reviewing and updating to present to the governor in response to his directive to us. So it's something we're working on, but I'm not aware of any, I know there's a subcommittee working on this, but I haven't seen any results at this point of follow-up. I know they were talking about it.
All right.
I do have something in the commissioner's report later this morning that brings some good news to that particular topic. So I'll save that for later.
Okay, good. Okay. Any further comments or questions?
I wanted to
Yeah.
bring something to light. I think it's in, I lost it. I think it's, number 2. Schools should consider providing alternative means or methods of continuing education where the student is subject to exclusionary discipline practices. Alternative means and methods may include, without limitation, distance and virtual learning and community partnerships. I just wanted to highlight that as far as some of the stakeholders and community partners. One of those major ones that came and did a presentation for us was the faith-based community partners, like St. Mark, who has a, I'm sorry, go ahead. The program, I forgot the name of the program. Oh, the Tendaji Project, that's who funds it. But when children are, and they've been partnering with Little Rock School District, with Mr. Poor, and when students are suspended, instead of going home to no one at home or being out on the street, they can come to the church and they can get continued education there. So I just want to highlight that we also need to keep in mind getting to the co-ops and the districts, not to forget to partner with their faith-based communities as well, and that is a source of help that can be utilized as well.
Great. All right, Ms. Newton.
I had one question on the report, and that was the only one I had. It was on item 11. Have we been given waivers on discipline laws?
Yes, I don't have the exact data, but it is my understanding from the charter school office that many of them do have waivers of discipline laws.
So exactly what would that waiver look like? What are they, I guess what I'm asking, what are they waiving?
I didn't ask Ms. Boyd to be here, but I know one of our other attorneys, Ms. Hyatt, has been working with the charter office and might be able to speak to that a little bit.
Good morning, Mary Claire Hyatt, Department of Education. So I'm not sure of all of them, but I do know that we have people that have waivers of, although it's not, I don't think, actually in the discipline section in the law, that we have a lot of waivers of ALE. We have some waivers of student services. We may have some, I would need to check, but I think we have some waivers of publishing or putting the school discipline policies, something about that, because they have some flexibility in how they're getting those to parents, I think, as opposed to doing it in the traditional, in your student handbook. But I would want to check on that, but I think that is one of them. But we did check with the charter office on the actual school discipline chapter of the law, and we're told that there are schools that do have waivers of that, and there are schools I know that have waivers of some of the provisions of rule dealing with ALE and things like that.
Okay. All right.
And I think that would be our continuation of your recommendation, would be to look at what do they have waivers of and why, and how are they using them, and is that something we can incorporate into flexibility for all, or something that we need to re-examine and provide information to the charter authorizing panel on?
Great. All right. I will look to Dr. Hill to make a motion to accept this report.
I move we accept the discipline report.
All right.
Second?
Second by Ms. Dean. So motion by Dr. Hill, second by Ms. Dean. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same side. Okay. Question, do we need to officially disband this task force by vote or just
You
by?
don't have to
enact?
vote on it.
Okay.
I mean, no.
Okay, so I didn't know how formal we needed to get with that. So, but we will thank you for your work, which isn't over, of course, and is morphing into that important link to family community engagement. But we appreciate it, and we all, I think, take on a new responsibility to be asking good questions about discipline when there are waivers, when other things come up in light of this. So thank you. All right.
Dr. Barth, if I may, I think it may be appropriate, and we'll do this anyway, but if you all want to direct the department to send this to the members of the General Assembly, I think that would be an appropriate action. I don't think you have to vote on it. It could be just.
Please do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Great. So next up, Dr. McKenzie, with the details of the OUP report. And I'm sorry for us getting into a dialogue about it before you got a chance to put the data up.
Good morning, Sarah McKenzie, Executive Director, Office for Education Policy at the University of Arkansas, and I loved listening to your discussion about discipline. It's such an important topic, and we appreciate the opportunity to help you gather the data and see what's going on across the state. So this all started with Act 1329, and we've been doing the research. Remember that it bans the use of OSS as a consequence for truancy. And in 1617, we included new categories in the discipline reporting to try to reduce the percentage of incidences and infractions and consequences that were being labeled other, because we weren't able to identify what those other consequences were. So today we're going to talk quickly about discipline trends over time, compliance with Act 1329, ban on OSS for truancy, racial disproportionalities, which we've talked about briefly this morning. A new topic is the School Severity Index, identifying which types of schools are high exclusion schools. Student absenteeism in discipline, and this sort of speaks to what Commissioner Key was talking about. A part of the ESSA model for schools is looking at chronic absenteeism. So we were interested to see how discipline related to that indicator of chronic absenteeism. And I'm really excited to look at high school graduation, and for the first time this year, we're looking at college enrollment for kids that have graduated across the state and how discipline impacted their college enrollment. So the red line is the total enrollment. Our total state enrollment has not changed very much since 2007-08. It's gone up a little bit. The green line is the number of infractions and consequences. They're the same. Every infraction now has a consequence. And you can see that the number of infractions and consequences has really increased since 2012-13. We don't think that that's because there's more discipline problems going on. We think that's because more people are focusing on it, because we're talking about it and are doing a better job reporting it. So we don't see this as a negative trend. This has been one of the challenges of studying discipline. Is more discipline a good thing or a bad thing? If I have a school where there's no discipline going on, does that mean that the kids are just running amok and no one's paying any attention? Or does it mean that the kids are really focused on their studies and doing a good job? There's no way for us to tell. All the discipline data are self-reported, so we can only tell what schools report to us about discipline. And I really want to caution us to make sure that more discipline isn't necessarily seen as a negative behavior for a school, a negative indicator for a school. Exclusionary discipline is something that we are concerned about. So this is this is the percentage of infractions, the number of infractions since 2007-08. Like we've said before, over 80% of the referrals are for other disorderly conduct and insubordination. These all seem very subjective. Okay, so the majority of the discipline referrals are not for fighting or truancy or bullying or drugs, alcohol, tobacco. They're for other disorderly conduct and insubordination. This year, there was one other referral for every 4 students in the state. That's a lot of other. Even with the new reporting categories, we still have mostly other infractions. So we looked at the total other and then broke out the new categories, which are, oops, that scooted over. Cell phone electronic devices was 9% now of the other that wouldn't have been reported previously. Stealing, theft, harassment, little bitty pieces down there, public display of affection. But still, 87% of the other are still other. We still didn't get at what those referrals were for. The consequences that are identified as other have also increased. And again, there was one other consequence for every 4 students in the state. So we don't know what those consequences are, and we can't determine. But we did add new categories last year, and those did a better job of getting at what was going on. Detention made up 29% of those other responses. A warning was 13%. And then there was some Saturday school bus suspension and a very small percentage of parent-guardian conference, which I think, you know, as we talk about community and family engagement, is interesting that that's not happening more frequently. But we still have 45% of the infractions that we don't know what the consequences, we don't know what they were. So in particular, we're interested about student consequences for truancy. Most of the time, it's in-school suspension, 53% of the time in 16-17. Other was 38% of the time. And OSS is still 7% of the time, which is over 1,000 cases in 2016-17. It is a reduction from the initial rate of 13% in 07-08, but it's still, you know, happening. Yes?
When you say a case, could the same student have several cases?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Disproportionalities in student discipline. We've looked at these bubble charts with you before. I want to take just a minute and walk through it. This is about program association. So we have regular ed, special ed, non-free and reduced lunch participation, and free and reduced lunch participation. And this is looking at how students in these programs are disciplined, what consequences do they receive for any infraction that they get. The size of the bubble indicates how many kids out of 100 in the state are given a consequence. So for special education, 86.6 students in the state are given a consequence. And for non-free and reduced lunch, it's 28.9. So that's a much smaller size of the bubble. So the bubble gives you a sense of the incidence rate for these different populations. The red line, you can see, it shows how many result in ISS, about 35%. And you can see, because all the bubbles are sort of associated the same way along that red line, for all the populations, it's about 35% of incidences that result in ISS. For the darker red line goes to OSS, expulsion, or ALE. Expulsion and ALE, you'll remember, are very infrequent. So that's about 20%. For the non-free and reduced lunch population, it's about 15%. So the other bubbles for regular ed, special ed, and free reduced lunch all overlap there, and they're all about 20%. But for non-free and reduced lunch, it's scooted over a little bit for 15%. These are not huge differences by program. Kids are being excluded or given ISS at about the same rates across these different programs. Although special ed students and FRL students are more likely to get referred for discipline. So now let's look by race. African American students are represented by the red circle with the black line around it. You can see that 117.6 African American students out of 100 are referred for a disciplinary consequence. And while it's similar rates of ISS across those groups, for African American students, it's 25%, while for the other races, it's over by 12-13%. So that is a pretty significant discrepancy. So when the one bubble is separate from the other bubbles, that's how you can tell where there's a discrepancy. Let's look specifically for disorderly conduct. Oh, let me go back. That one doesn't have a line. So you can see that the African American students are again more likely to get exclusionary discipline. Same thing for insubordination, and they are much more likely to be referred for insubordination than other types of students. Fighting, pretty much everybody gets exclusionary discipline for fighting, but African American students are much more likely to be referred and are even more likely to get exclusionary discipline. And here's truancy, which we were talking about. You can see that African American students are more likely to be referred for truancy and are more likely to get out of school suspension for truancy.
Even though the law was passed that you couldn't do that, right?
Yes, it turns out if you have a law, it doesn't mean that people are going to follow it. And maybe they don't know, you know, I mean, maybe it's a thing that they just haven't realized it yet. But we did identify for you the schools that are still using OSS in truancy cases.
Well, you know, when this was pointed out last year, we made a big effort to communicate that. We sent out a commissioner's memo, and this law's been on the books for, what, 5 years, I think? 2013 maybe is when it was passed. So, you know, it is a topic of communication. So
I think we might need to get the Megan the tweeter to get to start going around making this. I mean, as we're doing everything else, because this is, I mean, we have, I mean, that's a PR. I mean, just we got to know. If you don't know, and either we know and we don't do, all right, and I'm just giving the benefit of the doubt, or we know and we disregard.
yeah, Dr. McKenzie, do you know, in the review of the data, did we see any blip, any decline, any noticeable change, or I don't know if we would have the data yet because that would have been last school year. We sent out that very direct regarding this issue after the last year's presentation. So,
And these are the data from last school year,
Okay,
so
okay.
it wouldn't necessarily show up. But I think most schools are not suspending students for truancy anymore. I mean, the majority of them are not, but there are some that are still doing that, and perhaps communicating directly with those schools to let them know. You know, one of my concerns is that parents don't know. And when their student gets suspended, maybe for truancy, there's no one to advocate for them to not be given exclusionary discipline for that either. So maybe communicating with school boards would be helpful as well.
My question, Commissioner Key, what is the consequence for not following the law? If the law says don't do out-of-school suspension and you do it anyway, what happens?
well, generally, when a school doesn't follow the law, if it could be a standards violation or something of that nature. I don't know if, we would have to look to see if this is one of those situations. I mean, it could also be an equity issue. I mean, our equity assistance office could be engaged in something like reviewing and making sure schools understand, hey, you cannot do this. And if, I'm pretty sure, and I'm looking, but if a school defies a directive from the Equity Assistance Office, then that definitely would be a standards violation. And Deb's shaking her head, and Courtney's shaking her head. So there are consequences.
Okay. Good.
It's just we don't always know on a real-time basis until we see a year-end review worth of data like this.
I understand. And you made a very good point, because that's something that I brought up in our disciplinary task force, is that parents need to know all of their options and all their child's rights. When it comes down to discipline, any sort of discipline, they need to be completely informed so that they can know how to advocate for their child and make the best decision in those situations. And that's an issue as well.
Put that on your list. for your task force.
It's on there.
I also think this would be a good opportunity for the State School Board Association to put that into one of their training sessions, just to make people more aware of it. School boards certainly could then be checking up on the district to see what's going on, so.
Well, and that's a good idea. This fall, for the first time that I can remember, they asked us to participate with them in their fall regional sessions, and we put that on our list of things to discuss. And that's going to happen over October, November?
No.
Yeah, October, okay.
It's usually October.
Yeah, good, thank you, good idea. Deb sent, I'm sorry, Ms. I was just going to give you, back to the issue of the discipline waivers. We have 36 entries, which could be different campuses, right, of the same. So it could be multiple. Come on. I know you hate to come up to the microphone, but you're going to have to help me with this, this text.
Deborah Kaufman, Assistant Commissioner of Public School Accountability. I pulled up my school info and did a search at the state level. So if you click on the state level and then go to reports, there's a waiver report, and then I typed in a search for discipline. There's actually 37 entries. One of those was for a charter school that is now closed. So you have 36 current entries for a discipline waiver. A school may have multiple waivers for different things within discipline. Majority, those 36 entries were for the virtual charter schools, charter, open enrollment charter, and one district conversion charter. Lisa Academy, Hoss Hall, and the Future School of Fort Smith are the ones who have waivers for some portion of discipline.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Kaufman.
Okay, I have a question. Is the out of school if just for truancy, or could it be that they committed some, like they were caught with drugs or they were caught with a weapon when the truancy officer or whoever, and so they were truant, which called to attention the other thing, and then they were out of school suspended? Or is this absolute, they were not at school, somebody went and got them, or somebody reported them and they got out of school suspension, which seems sort of like an oxymoron.
That's an excellent, it does, doesn't it? That's an excellent question. What we can tell is what's reported in the discipline system. And in this case, the referral for truancy was tied to out-of-school suspension for that student. So it wasn't a referral for drugs or for fighting at the same time. It was, the referral was for truancy, and it was tied to out-of-school suspension. But that's an excellent point. I was looking through some school discipline policies last night, and it's, you know, in some cases, if kids are missing too much school, one of the consequences is immediate suspension. And they weren't clear whether it was in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension within the school policies. But it could just be that kind of situation. Not that someone's going and picking a kid up, but just they get suspended because they have missed enough days of school.
Really, if they're not at school, there's no point in suspending them, is there?
Well, they don't want to come anyways, apparently. So, yes, it's interesting.
We're doing them a favor. Yeah. I'm serious. I mean, no question.
It's you know, it's a very different take on discipline too. I was thinking when we talk about community engagement, sometimes people in the communities or on our school boards have a very different view of student discipline than we were discussing here earlier. It's much more consequence-based and less sort of proactive, let's help the kids. So that is one of the things about local control, is that they believe maybe that this is a fine way to deal with these situations, and that's a hard thing to change from where we are. So the school severity index is a new measure, and we are trying to get, from a statistical perspective, What types of schools are high exclusion schools? Given the given the referrals that students are given, who excludes students more than we would predict? Okay, so it was a big multivariate thing. You can look in the table, but essentially elementary schools use the shortest punishments relative to middle and high school grades, exclusionary punishments. Larger schools tend to administer shorter punishments. Schools with more black students tend to administer longer consequences, and this is the same thing you were referring to earlier, that it's about a type of school, not within the school. And on the positive note, on average, schools administered shorter exclusionary punishments during 16-17 relative to 14-15. So we are moving the needle in the right direction for kids. Student absenteeism and student discipline. So the first question is, what percentage of students are chronically absent? So missing more than 10 days, 10% of the days that they're enrolled in the school. Across the bottom is the grade levels. Oops. The red line is the percentage of students that are chronically absent. So we're at about 15% of kids that are missing 10% or more of the school year. When we look at it by grade in terms of exclusionary discipline, the green bars indicate kids that were not chronically absent. How many days were they excluded on average? And the gray bars indicate students who were chronically absent. How many days were they excluded? This gets confusing because OSS counts as absenteeism, right? So perhaps those students are more likely to be absent because they're being forced to be absent from school. But from a school level perspective, chronically absent kids are going to count negatively against you in your ESSA index. So you may want to find an alternative than excluding those students from school so that you don't get dinged for more chronic absenteeism than before. Particularly in grades 7 through 12, there's a really big gap between 7 through 10 especially. There's a big gap in kids who are chronically absent and how many days of OSS they're getting. Educational attainment, high school graduation, we can see that each exclusionary discipline incident a student experiences is associated with an approximately 0.25 percentage point lower likelihood of graduating on time. Most kids in Arkansas graduate on time. Really, we don't have a lot of variability in that. So the fact that there's any difference is really interesting because we held everything else constant. 8th grade reading, 8th grade math, school indicators. So there's still an effect of having an exclusionary discipline on your likelihood of graduating, especially in 9th grade. The 9th grade exclusion is the really significant one. College enrollment. So this is super exciting, and this is the first time we've looked at college enrollment data for students graduating from colleges from high schools in Arkansas. Overall, yes?
Back to that 9th grade, you said the exclusion. Why was that? I mean, when you were mentioning in the 9th grade specifically, was there any trend of when you said that was a high?
So we ran the models a couple different ways. One where we looked at overall exclusionary discipline counts in high school, and then we broke it down specifically by when those exclusions happened. And for whatever reason, the 9th grade exclusions were the significant year that impacted your graduation probability. Not 10th grade, not 11th grade, not 12th grade. It was in 9th grade.
Were there any variables that stood? I mean, was there anything that led to make you to wonder why that data was?
I do wonder why that is. And considering that we were controlling for all the other factors we could control for, I think it's very interesting. Maybe it has to do with most high schools start at 9th grade, so it's that transition year, and when students get a rough start at that year, then it impacts the rest of their time in school. I'm not sure why that would be. We just know that 9th grade is the one that really makes the difference.
Well, it would be interesting to see if some high schools just start 10th, 11th, 12th grade. If that would be the same.
Excellent question. We can look at that.
If you could run that data like
Absolutely.
that. Because now your middle school, some 8th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, you would see how that would look to see if there was any comparative analysis.
I think the majority of high schools in the state are 9-12.
Yeah.
So there'd just be a couple schools that are 10-12, and those, so it might not have
Sure,
enough
that-
power to look at
I
it,
got
but
it.
we definitely will. We'll get back to you on that.
So I think, and that's, when you look at when kids start getting behind on credits for graduation, if that starts, it starts in the 8th grade for a lot of kids, but for some kids, they don't take Algebra 1 until 9th grade or whatever, maybe they're not getting those high school credits until 9th grade. And if they're suspended and they get behind, they never catch up. And so I
that's
think that may be, which is why we factored in on-time credits as one of the
Yes.
student quality or school quality student success indicators. So again, showing how these things fit together, it's not just the attendance, it's also, are you on time? Because the farther behind you get, the less likely it is you're going to finish.
And that triggered from a coach. See, your clearinghouse grades started being recorded in the 9th grade, and the NCAA just changed that last year that you can't retake classes anymore to qualify. So I mean, used to, you could go in there and say, I want you to retake English, whatever, to get your core grades up. Now, after a certain grade, after 9th grade, you can't go back and retake those. So it is what it is. And if your ACT score is not up to correlate with your core GPA, you're done. So you don't even qualify for athletic scholarship, which may have been the only reason you got your school paid for. That's why that 9th grade triggers, because that's when it's law. You take it with you forever for college.
So they, in an effort to incentivize, they've almost disincentivized.
But that's an excellent point, Commissioner Key, about the on-time credits, and I think that could definitely be part of what's in play there for students not graduating. Okay, college enrollment. Overall, for the kids that we have 2 years of college going data on, so they would have graduated in 2012 to 2015, 2012 to 2015, it's about 100,000 kids. 48% of them went on to enroll in college within 1 or 2 years. And this is so exciting because it's national college data, which is different from what we've looked at before, which was just the percentage of students that enrolled in-state. This includes kids who went anywhere in the country. So 48% enrolled, and you can see the difference between the number of exclusionary consequences that they got in grades 9 through 12. This is just descriptive data, frequencies. But when we run the multivariate model, controlling for academic performance, controlling for student characteristics, and infraction, we do see that exclusionary discipline, each incident decreases the likelihood of them going to college by 1 percentage point, which is small, but significant. So conclusions and next step. Other infractions are still an issue, but the other consequences are getting clearer. So we've had this overall decline in OSS, ISS, and corporal punishment. We need to continue to assess how to gather meaningful information about both the infractions and the consequences that are being assigned to students. Some schools are still using OSS for truancy. We talked a little bit about what to do about that. Disproportionalities exist by race in both referrals and infractions, but again, it's not within schools, but it's happening between districts across the state. Chronic absenteeism is associated with increased OSS, so schools should consider alternative forms of discipline. And exclusionary discipline in high school is associated with lower likelihood of high school graduation and of enrolling in college. We need to continue to track these metrics as we go forward.
Have you all run the data, or is there a way to find out, like, within schools, does it matter what the race of the principal or the race of the teacher is, as far as their acceptable discipline or not acceptable discipline? Or is it purely some other factor that's not identified?
So that's an excellent question, and I have in my notes that you've asked that before.
I think the reason
No,
I did,
which is good.
the first year I taught school, I was fortunate enough to be in a mixed race student body and mixed race
Faculty.
teachers. And I was young and trying to absorb everything I could get, and the teachers who were a different race than I was told me that I was too easy on the students that were the race they were, and I was just trying to, you know, get to the end of every day. I mean, truthfully, but so, you know, I don't know what that is, because you talk about culture, you know, and I don't know. Do teachers need to learn what works for mom and dad at home? Or do teachers need to try to help all kids learn how to function in the world later when they're not going to be excuses made? I don't know. I mean, it's a...
I don't know
if
the
there's any way
answer
do
to those
research on that.
questions,
Yeah.
but we don't have race or ethnicity data on the teachers that are doing the referral for these discipline incidences for students, particularly in high school. The kids have 6 or 8 teachers during the day. And we don't have student-teacher linkages either. We have the students at the school and then the teachers at the school. So we could look by principal and what their race ethnicity is. I think it's often the assistant principal that's handling the discipline situation, so we might look at that too as we roll forward, but we could sure do that.
Well, and that would help a little, because a good one or a bad one set the tone for the building.
But again, I can't tell whether more discipline is better or worse. We could look at the schools with the higher severity indices, maybe, and
the
see
level
as we
of
roll forward.
Punishment, not the level of discipline.
The level of punishment, the severity of the punishment for the infraction. Good point, thank you.
Is there an indicator for uniform infractions? Because there's so many public schools that have transitioned to uniforms, and there's, you know, you've got to have a certain color socks, certain color shoes, shirt tucked in, belt, and if there's some sort of infraction there, is there a code for that? And if not, is that what's in other, perhaps? I don't know.
I'm sure there's something for dress code violations, but I don't.
I didn't see that in any of
Yeah, I
these,
don't
so-
see it pop up in there. So let me check on that.
Okay.
Dr. Moore?
I have a question. One thing that struck me was in the severity, looking, it says larger schools administer shorter punishments. Do y'all have any, and that's contrary to what I would probably initially believe, that what a smaller school would be able to more appropriately address students. Is that, do y'all have any ideas why? Do larger schools have more options for consequences? Or is
So I think the larger schools are located in certain regions of the state and more larger population settings. And I know that, you know, most of the schools in Northwest Arkansas in particular don't do a lot of exclusionary discipline and aren't very severe. So I think it's maybe related more to urbanicity than to school size, which is correlated in there too.
Any questions over here? Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, Dr.
thank you very
McKenzie.
much.
So, Ms. Alice Ford, do we need to accept this report as well? Vote to, no, okay, okay, so that it comes as information. It is, now, one question for you, probably for you, in terms of next steps. This report is statutorily
Required, yes, sir.
required on an annual basis?
Yes, I
On an
believe
annual
so.
basis? And so we would expect to get it about this time, or the board would expect to get it about this time next year?
Yes.
I'm wondering, back to connect the dots back to our previous action on the task force report, if that might be the time to get an update, status report on the degree to which the elements of that task force report have been able to be implemented. Would that make sense? So I think I would like to see both results, and we are seeing some needle moving slowly in the right direction with the actions kind of taken by this board. Does that make sense? So next fall, whenever that is, if both of those could come together,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that makes sense.
We can make that happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Okay, next up, we have a series, Miss Alice Ford, don't go too far. She's got to get her stuff. We have a series of rules to be released for public comment. The first one are the ADE rules concerning governing consolidation and annexation of school districts.
Yes, as Dr. Barth said, we are requesting approval to put the ADE rules governing consolidation and annexation of school districts out for public comment. Changes are merely as a result of Act 745 and 936 of 2017, which were as a result of the repeal of ACTAP and the implementation of the Act 930 support system. There was also one older update that needed to be made as a result of Act 1155 of 2013. And so all of these are just, again, corrections to be brought up to compliance with changes to the law.
Ms. Hook?
I noticed in a couple, or maybe more places, 5.01 and 11.02, the reference was made, it reads, to meet academic, fiscal, or facilities distress requirements. Do we still use that phrasing, the distress part?
For facilities and fiscal, yes, those are still distress programs.
Okay, so it's not, okay.
It's the academic distress
Academic
terminology
period,
that was.
sorta, and then physical and facilities distress. Okay,
Correct.
I just didn't want you to do all this hard work, put it out, and then, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I will entertain a motion to release these for public comment. Motion by Ms. Dean, second by Dr. Hill. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Ms. Hyatt, these are final approval on the rules governing student permanent records.
Mary Claire Hyatt, Arkansas Department of Education. As Dr. Barth said, we are requesting approval, final approval for the ADE rules governing student permanent records. Changes to these were necessary to incorporate Act 936 of 2017. We also just kind of brought them up to date because they hadn't been changed in a very long time. So some of the language was removed to remove outdated requirements and language and to get us up to speed with technology. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions over here? Ms. Hyatt? Oh, all right. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve these rules. Motion by Ms. McFettridge. Second. Second by Mr. Williamson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Great. Okay, and Ms. Freno, I see you coming forward on the, these are the rules governing educator licensure.
Yes, good morning, Lori
Final
Freno,
approval.
Department of Education. These are proposed amendments to the educator licensure rules that were revised to implement the educator career continuum and to make technical corrections to certain other provisions. There was a public comment hearing, public comment period, and no substantive changes were made as a result of the public comments. And we respectfully request that these rules receive the final approval.
Thank you.
And Cheryl Reinhardt is here, the Director of Licensure, in case anyone has any questions.
Ms. Newton?
I thought these were going out for public comment again, because that was what it had said, so this may be too late now, but I had a comment under the application for Master Professional Educator License under that section, and I didn't catch it till this time when I read it back through again, but under the reciprocal license, one of the...
Ms. Newton, if you could just reference which section, the
It's
section number?
11.03, sorry.
Great, thank you.
Under the reciprocal part, the receipt of one of the awards, if we're looking at a reciprocal license, it's got under their Arkansas Teacher of the Year. I wondered if we might want to put Teacher of the Year from any state. I know we may not ever get that situation occur, but I think that would be appropriate there. Do you see where I'm at?
Mhm.
And I'm sorry I didn't catch it till this last reading.
Cheryl Reinhardt for the Department of Education. We didn't consider that. We didn't think about
I
it.
didn't think about it till this time.
I don't know that we would deny anybody on the basis of if they came out of state and they were a Teacher of the Year. But, you know, Teacher of the Year programs are different from state to state.
Sure.
Would it be all right if we put that in a future
It's
amendment?
up to y'all, yeah. But,
Okay. Because I think we might want to consider that and just to think about how different those programs are from state to state before we actually put it in the rule. And if we would kind of research that and look at it,
Okay.
probably wouldn't have a problem with it, but,
And I don't know that it would ever occur, but,
well,
you know.
yeah, it
you know,
could though.
yeah.
Certainly could. We'd be happy to have someone else's Teacher
Sure,
of the Year.
that's what I thought too.
So,
That actually raises a question on this, a related question. You know, that if there was some other, we have a discrete list of things that would give someone this status automatically. And I'm wondering, in the future, if you could think about, is there a means which someone could make an appeal on the basis of some other distinctive aspect of their record?
I think to the extent that we do, you know, there's never a perfect, I mean, sometimes there's just not a perfect fit under rules. And, you know, so we do from time to time consider, even just for licensure, whether something is really meeting the intent of the rule or whether it's, you know, it may not just be a perfect fit.
Okay.
So I do think with this being a new process, we're going to be open to that.
Okay.
And what we're going to do, for example, with the approval of programs that we say will qualify you if you complete this micro-credential or this program, we're going to have a committee that looks at that. So I think that we can accommodate that without having to do a formal appeal. If we could maybe see how it goes the first year, and if that becomes an issue, then we can certainly make that change. Because, you know, we'll be changing rules after the legislative session again, so
That's right.
it won't be that long. I mean, if that's all right with the.
It's fine.
with you.
It's fine. Yeah. Good point.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I would entertain a motion for final approval on this very large set and very important set of rules. All right, Ms. Dean? All right, Ms. Chambers, I think people are getting a little tired. Any further comment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign? All right.
Sorry, who moved and seconded?
Motion by Ms. Dean, second by Ms. Chambers. I don't think there was reluctance, I think there was just inaction. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freno. And Ms. Hyatt is back up on the final approval for the Public School Choice Act of 2015 rules.
Mary Claire Hyatt, Arkansas Department of Education. These are, it is a request for final approval for the ADE rules governing the Public School Choice Act of 2015. We did make a non-substantive change after the public comment period, but no substantive changes were made. Changes were made to reflect Act 8 of 2018, Acts 986 and 1066 of 2017, and also to address some of the issues for the hearing process in terms of allowing the non-resident and resident school districts time to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate that very, very much.
I
Dr.
do
Moore?
have a question, Ms. Hyatt, and
Yes,
I didn't
ma'am.
do my homework, so I know I'm too late on this. But the application, is that part in rules, or can that be changed after these rules are promulgated?
when they receive it and the stamping, is that what you're talking about?
That and the race.
So,
down
I think the part of receiving the application and when you receive it and how you stamp it, that is in law, and so I think that's something that we can't change in the rule. And then what was the second thing?
The race.
Um,
Listed on there.
So I'm not sure
I
if
should-
that part is in the law.
I should have made public comment, so I know.
If race is in this, that it has to be on the application for school choice. Give us just a second, please. So race is not one of the required things for the application for transfer. I think that the reason that it is included on the current form is for data collection purposes to see if there's any type of, trend or otherwise. But if that's something that you would like us to look into in terms of how we're using it or removing it, we can get more information for you.
I don't want to delay the rule process. I'm sure it'll be changed in the future again, but just something to keep in mind because of our last hearing that came up.
Well, and also for certain districts like Garland County School Districts that are still under the 1989
They need that.
School Choice Act, and might be subject to the provision that was in there about the cap, they would need to be aware of that.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, then I would entertain a motion for final approval on these rules.
Move to approve for final approval. Second.
All right, motion by Ms. Chambers, second by Ms. Dean. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, I apologize. Yeah. Ms. Dedman, these are the ADE rules governing instructional materials.
Yes, we're requesting final approval for these rules today. The board released them for public comment on July 12th, and a public comment hearing was held on July 27th. We did receive one comment, but it didn't require any change to the rules, so no substantive comments have resulted in changes. So I'd request at this time final approval for the proposed rules.
Great. Okay. Are there any questions on these rules? Instructional materials? Then I would entertain a motion for final approval of these rules. All right. Motion by Ms. McFedrid, second by Dr. Moore. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much, Ms. Dedman. And Ms. Hyatt's back. And now we're back to public comment. So those rules were final. This is public comment. And this is the rules on district requirements on personnel policy, salary schedules, and other items.
Yes, so these rules, the proposed rules are quite different from the original rules. The original rule was ADE rules governing school district requirements for personnel policies, salary schedules, minimum salaries, and documents posted to the websites. Due to changes from Acts 869 and 1039 of 2017, some changes were made, and then additional changes, which is why the rule looks so different now, was made to remove any language that was essentially a regurgitation of that was in law. And so the rule has changed into just the website requirements. We added things to bring this rule in line with the standards for accreditation and to take all these kind of bits and pieces from throughout the law that have been amended through the years to include a website requirement and put it all in one place kind of for convenience. So this is just for public comment, so a request that the board release for public comment.
Would this be the spot where we could add for teacher absenteeism and student absenteeism for the report that be posted on the website?
So this is just what has to be posted on the website. So if you want to suggest an additional requirement for website posting, then it would be something that would kind of fall into this rule.
Okay. Do I need to say that to you today, or do I need to send an email to you for public comment?
You can say it to me today.
Thanks.
Okay.
I
So,
appreciate that.
But if you have more specificity, I would urge you to send an email. And on this, of course, as on all rules, the board has full power to make public comment, just like other folks. And the best way to do it, the most direct way, is obviously to send it to the attorney working most closely on the rule. Rather, you don't necessarily have to go through or you could go through the formal public comment process on the website. Okay? And so you're going to have some comments.
That was my comment.
Great. All right. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. So that's out for public comment. We will see it again and just in time for the next legislative session. And then what was that? The motion was,
To put out for public comment.
yeah. Who was that motion?
No one?
I didn't
All right.
hear it. I thought it came from down there.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Williamson, second by Ms. Chambers. All in favor say aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Thank you. I apologize. I'm starting, things are running together up here. Okay, and then Ms. Hyatt also here for the release for public comment on the calculation methods for declining enrollment and
Yes.
student growth.
Act 741 of 2017 made changes to these rules necessary. Additional changes were made just to provide clarity on the process for determining how student growth funding was calculated in the allowable uses. And we request that you release for public comment.
Any questions or comments? I would entertain a motion on this rule for
So
public.
moved.
All right.
Second.
All right, motion by Ms. Zook, second by Ms. Chambers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. All right, and then finally, Ms. Hyatt, the rules concerning class size and teaching load.
Yes, so
And
this
these
is.
are final approval.
Yes, sir. Consideration for final approval of the ADE rules governing class size and teaching load. The new standards for accreditation changes, as well as Act 243 of 2018, made this new rule necessary. So this is new, not changes to an existing rule. The rule went through 3 periods of public comment. Substantive changes were made after the first and second rounds. No substantive changes were made after the third round of public comment. And so we request that they be released for, or not released for public comment, be finally approved.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Zook.
Okay, I think with the comments, the public comments from teachers with regard to class size and going over, you know, we talk about discipline, we talk about wraparound, we talk about whole child, we have RTI, we have dyslexia mark, we have so many things that I think to an extent we need to really listen to them and maybe bring it before the legislature, because the additional things that are required. And I also am concerned that with the high teacher absenteeism and to a lesser degree the student, if the student is in a room with a substitute and the substitute is substituting in a room where they've gone over by 2 students, that's more than just a highly qualified teacher having that group. So I think whether it's talking to the legislature, whether it's just looking in the ESSA kinds of thing, I don't know what we can do, but I do think that they have a valid point. And I know we can't change class size with a rule. We have to, you know, we'd have to talk about it in legislation. But I am concerned because of all the things that a good teacher has to do now. That 2 more kids doesn't sound like a lot. And I know the research says unless you get below 17, that like 17 to 27 doesn't make that much difference. But I'm not so sure that that still holds true with all the new things that have been added, because there's no new research that demonstrates that now that we're doing all these extras. So I know that you're the messenger.
Well, I can assure you that through this process, I mean, we have had extensive conversations about class size and teaching load through the process of promulgating these rules, and I think it's something that everyone at the department is thinking about and working on, so.
Thank you.
I share Ms. Zook's real concerns about these class size issues. I will just put that on the record for what it's worth. Is there a motion regarding this rule?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Williamson. And the motion is to approve, I assume, Mr. Williamson.
Yes, sir.
Second by Dr. Moore. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ms. Hook, are you opposed? Or-
No, I'm not opposed.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, I didn't hear you on the first vote.
Last time.
All right, okay, thank you. Thanks to all the legal staff for all your hard work in shepherding all these rules through the process, okay? All right, we move to reports. Ms. House is not here today. So I guess we need to adjourn that meeting, or we have
Guess we adjourn the action meeting and go to reports?
yeah.
'Cause
So
she's under reports.
yeah. So let's. Is there a motion to adjourn the action meeting?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. So we end our formal action meeting, which allows our reporter to go home. And just for everybody's information, Ms. Hill was unable to be here this month, but she will be back next month. So we appreciate very much your sitting in for us today. Okay, we are to reports, and if you need a break, okay. All right. If we can keep it to 3 minutes, I have a class to teach at 12:10, so I'm going to try. That was no. Let's take a 3-minute break. She needs to. So let's if we can keep it to 3 or 4 minutes, that will keep me up.
bad news.
Yeah, please.
You know you're going to one of my favorite districts in the whole world.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for your being sympathetic to my schedule. All right, we are on to the reports, and Ms. House is unable to be here today, but she will return with her report next month. My report is fairly brief. I plan to meet with the commissioner and Ms. Wendell and visit about kind of a visit to a community around the state. A district that makes sense, maybe in February or March of next year, so, or maybe April. We've got to work around the session and all of that. So more to come on that, and hope to have some news on that so people can get it on their calendars. Then we'll also visit about this issue of school discipline and reporting out to appropriate bodies that we talked about earlier. So I'll have a couple of items next month, and then of course I have some things down in the committee and task force news to come. But I'll turn it over to Commissioner Key.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my report, I'll start with a follow-up from yesterday. We were not ready to make this announcement yesterday, but I am today, and it's with great pride that I announce Dr. Jeremy Owa will be appointed as the superintendent for the Pine Bluff School District. We will miss him greatly in his role, which he's been with us a little over a year, and I may get I may get stoned by my own folks here because of this move, but he is definitely well prepared to take on the challenge, and we will be certainly looking forward to hearing success down there under his leadership. So I wanted to make that announcement to you all as part of my report.
Thank you, Jeremy, for doing that, and we look forward to partnering with you in the months ahead.
In a similar vein, Ms. Reinhardt, you want to come on up and make some remarks?
Thank you, and I would like to add my congratulations. I don't think you could have had a better pick for Pine Bluff. So, Cheryl Reinhardt with Department. I just wanted to say to you that I'm also leaving. I'm going to go to the North Little Rock School District as their Director of Human Resources and Legal Affairs. And I wanted to take this time to thank you. It's been my absolute honor and pleasure to be employed at the department and to serve this board, because you really have the students of Arkansas at heart. I appreciate your diligence with which you serve, all of the work that you do, all of the reading that you do, and all of your thoughtfulness. And it's been my pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you.
And Ms. Reinhardt, I want to say the work you have done to transform the PLSCB process from our perspective has been just enormous. I mean, and the responsiveness every time we've had critiques and there were challenges early on. You have responded and made things better, and I think it's a much, much, much better process than the time you arrived. You've made a big difference in this regard. I think Ms. Newton may have a comment.
I want to echo that and also add the licensure. That is huge. And so as a former active teacher, but still a teacher, I thank you for what you did for teachers and to be able to elevate the profession and to give us an avenue to move forward without having to leave teaching. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
I appreciate it.
All right, and so a couple of additional things. One is we have this week a very good celebration of our students in Arkansas. The National Merit Scholarship Program announced our National Merit semifinalists, and we have 132 in the state of Arkansas, and that's all private, public, homeschool students. So we certainly want to acknowledge that, the talent of these students and their hard work. And finally, I mentioned earlier about some information I would be passing along. This week we learned that we have received a federal grant that will bring $1.8 million a year for the next 5 years to Arkansas to help us develop a model comprehensive school-based mental health programs around the state. This will support us in training school staff in mental health first aid, trauma-informed schools, PBIS work, and adverse childhood experiences awareness. Dr. Betsy Kendall deserves a great deal of the credit for this, and Jerry Clark with our school health services. So that unit did a great job putting this together, and we're very proud of the work that they are doing and will continue to do through this grant. So very appropriate for the conversation that we had earlier today and the ongoing conversation in our state about the need for developing mental health supports for our students.
Great.
Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Okay. We're now down to committees, liaisons, and appointments. Other appointments. And first up is the Task Force on Family Engagement, and turn it over to Ms. Dean for her report.
Things are moving along swiftly, and we are getting so much accomplished. I want to thank Commissioner Key and the department for actually appointing or hiring a full-time person for family engagement and community. There's Kim Wright and Megan Abels, and then we've got a new member, which is LaDonna Spain. Am I correct? So we had a meeting last Friday with all of our subcommittees together, all of the members on the subcommittee. We've also got our dates lined up for our regional meetings. We plan on having several regional meetings, bringing all of the community stakeholders together. We've got our central regional meeting. Let me just say this. Each meeting in each region will have 2 meetings a day in that city, or two cities that are close together. We'll have a morning meeting from 9:30 to 11, I believe, and then an evening meeting from 6 to 7:30. And we did it that way so that we could reach those parents who work during the day and those who are stay-at-home moms. So we're just trying to reach as many community members as possible. Let me pull this up so I can get the dates. Central Region, it will be at Philander Smith College, and that's Thursday, October, I think that's the 25th. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's October 25th, 9:30 to 11 in the morning, 6 to 7:30. That's at Central. That's the Central Region meeting.
Both at Philander.
Yes, both at Philander. Northeast is at St. Bernard's Auditorium, and that is Wednesday, October 3rd. And that's actually, both of those are at the same place.
That's in Jonesboro.
Yes, that's in Jonesboro. So that's the Northeast Region meeting. Northwest is in Huntsville, Arkansas, at the Carroll Electric Cooperative, and that's Wednesday, October 17th, day and evening, morning and evening session. Southeast is on Tuesday, October 23rd, in McGee at the Boys and Girls Club. Oops, I lost it. And then Southwest is Friday, October 5th. I don't think they have an actual building yet. But what we're doing is asking community stakeholders to help with to cover the cost of feeding people. I think each region will probably do it a little bit different. Some have talked about doing booths and things of that sort. But we have the toolkit that I mentioned before. We have a toolkit available. We have electronic flyers, postcards, posters available. We have some printed and some electronic. We've also got a media packet available, so if they want to do radio spots, TV spots, anything, so that the message is consistent. And like I said, Kim and Megan and LaDonna have done an excellent job on creating that package for everyone. We are almost done with the standards. That was something that we worked on the last Friday. And one thing that I want to brag on, just everyone that has worked on this, is just sitting in the room last Friday and looking at the diversity in the room. We had students represented, we had teachers represented, we had administrators, we had what we call just parents that don't have wear several different hats. Their main occupation or their main job is just being a parent. And we had a vast array of people from Hispanic, Caucasian, Black, from all over the state. We have the faith community represented. I think they did an excellent job of taking all of those people that applied to be in this or asked to be in this coalition, and making sure that we had diversity across the state, not just across the state, but ethnically and as far as age as well. So I don't want to belabor it anymore, but things are going very well. So let me also say this: we could use everyone's help that's on the state board. If you, according to the regions, if every state board member could come and help us and be in attendance and represent and just show support for the meetings that are coming up, that would be huge. We'd appreciate it.
So if Ms. Wendell or somebody else from the department can get out to us all of those dates, and then if we could email directly back to whoever that contact person is,
Kim, right?
probably Kim, to let her know, so that we're not communicating with each other, but that to let her know that that we'll be attending on a certain date,
Yes.
at a certain time. That would be fantastic. So I know not everyone's schedule may allow it, but I think we can probably cover, with that many dates, we could probably cover most of those, and I think it would be very good for us to be in attendance. So, so wonderful stuff. My question on the standards, will those will be coming to this board for consideration? Is that the?
I believe so. That's my
So,
understanding.
okay.
Yeah.
So that's something for us to look forward to as a deliverable from y'all's work.
Yes.
So, excellent. Other questions there? Ms. Newton?
The toolkit, is there any way that we could have that maybe put on the website or made it available other than just at a regional meetings? Maybe make it available to districts. I don't know what your plans are for that.
Yes, I think Ms. Deborah Cochran is going to speak about that.
Deborah Kaufman. Yes, when everything is finished, and you've looked over it and approved it, everything will be posted. It's still, the standards have been downsized from 10 to 6 categories, and they're just trying to get that finalized through this regional work, and then the toolkit will be built, and it'll be an ongoing build of the toolkit, but the basic framework, we'll share everything and let you look it over and give us recommendations, but everything will be posted.
I just wanted to thank Commissioner for putting the resources on this, and to Ms. Dean for all the work and the leadership, for everyone that's worked on it. It's central to so many things and a lot of good. And I just wanted to extend an appreciation.
And just to add, this is the beginning, this is the foundational work, but once these pieces are in place, then we have to start working on the content of the messages. And so, as you know, in ESSA and in Act 930, parents, families, communities are recommended to be engaged in the school level improvement process, the review of accountability data. You know how we went out to stakeholders and asked about our ESSA school index, about our plan. And so that is a repeating process. So once the frameworks and the toolkit are built, it lays that foundation, and then we put it into context of, well, what are the messages about? What are the topics we need to discuss?
Great. And also thanks to Forward for their assistance with Ms. Dickey in her role there as well. Okay, student discipline will disappear from this list for now. So again, thank you for that, and I'll work with Ms. Wendell in getting this up to date. Forward Arkansas, everybody should have gotten notice on that, the big data meeting on the 27th, September 27th, and so I hope folks can attend that. The other thing that I've been working on with Forward is that the Forward is beginning to flesh out its legislative agenda, and I'm working on a teacher pipeline, teacher and leader pipeline task force. We've had one meeting, really beginning the process of identifying, okay, what are the big things that need to be done legislatively. One thing is the teacher cadet program, and doing what we can to expand that. And so that is one piece, but then of course also thinking about other aspects of funding, especially teacher pay, and then also prestige in the profession. So more to come on all things there. I also wanted to thank Ms. Zook. She has agreed to step in as the liaison to Forward. She and I will visit about, or we'll get in touch about when the most natural time for her to take that role is, depending on what the activities of Forward are. So but it'll of course be no later than the end of the calendar year. All right, ESSA Steering Committee, Ms. Newton?
The ESSA School Index reports to schools should be released for private viewing and reporting by the end of September, with public release in October. So that's very exciting to have such a quick turnaround from the test scores and to go through the correction period to get that out that quick to schools. That's a big deal for schools. There's a new link for the My School. If you go to the home page, in the bottom right-hand corner, I think it was, there's a green box at the bottom to make that link a little easier for people to access. So you can look for that, and they've also put a link to the My School on the parents' webpage. Our steering committee will meet in October on the 24th, so at the end of this next month. And they allowed me to sit in on a meeting with a group that's looking at the SQSS indicators, to look at those indicators of student success and how they map and how they align to the to an employability skills framework. So to look at how good are these indicators at showing us what we need to know about students and what we need to know about a school success. So that process that we talked about, as far as continual cycle of looking at this and not letting it be stagnant, that's ongoing. So lots of things happening, and they're all great.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Newton. Any questions? Super. Then public school accountability, Ms. Zook.
Yes, Ms. Kaufman provided me with a good report, and out of consideration of your time and her understanding, I forwarded that to Ms. Wendell, who will then forward it to each of the board members so you can look at it. And also have asked her and maybe Mr. Rogers as well, if they will tell us, like there are several different federal programs, and I'd like for them to say to the board, you know, this is what this kind of federal money is used for in a school, and this is what this is used for, so that you could better understand that if you don't already. And then yesterday, we were using a lot of terms like restricted fund balance and unrestricted and everything on a fiscal, and since we have districts under fiscal distress and takeover, that if they could help us understand, and these both can be during reports, they can both help, just not an in-depth, we're not gonna become financial officers, but, you know, so the board can understand you might have a lot of money over here restricted, but that doesn't help much on your operations kind of budget. So if y'all would like to have like a, you know, 5-minute, everything you want to know about public school finance kind of thing, then we will encourage them to do that. If not, then, you know, that's completely up to you. I think what a lot of people don't understand, even in the business world, is public school finance is a very complicated task. You know, when you go to school, you take several classes in public school finance, and I think to help understand all the hard work that Mr. Rogers and his team do, that it would be good for us to have that information, and then from Ms. Kaufman, what each of those federal programs fund.
And then also the state programs, such as National School Lunch Act. Is that possible to kind of put those restricted, larger state programs, not every small one, but especially those big ones? That'd be great.
Yeah, because everybody doesn't have the opportunity to go to joint ed during adequacy, and how they're, you know, they fund things. People think that they tell the districts how to spend it, but it is a funding thing, and when it gets to the districts, the way they spend it is often very different.
All right.
Does that work for y'all?
Well done. Thank you. All right, AD Human Resources. Ms. Chambers, anything this month?
I just had the privilege of meeting with some of the leadership from the Human Resources Group, and just really continuing to serve as there's need, nothing specific.
Okay, great. And then NASB, Ms. Newton, anything?
We had our GAC call this past Monday. There was they said some movement on the appropriations for this next year, which is, when you're thinking about Congress, that's probably pretty big news.
Yeah.
That they thought that by, depending on what the hurricane did, they said that could play into it, but by the end of the month, probably see a bill passed. So that they were down to the stage of the Senate and the House agreeing, I think, which, never mind, we'll go ahead. As the plans across the nation, all have been approved except for Florida. One thing that they did say was the peer review of assessments. That process, there would be, from the Department of Education, there would be probably more attention paid to the English language proficiency assessment part to make sure it met the requirements of Title I, and then also the accommodations to make sure that all students with disabilities and EL students had the opportunity to participate in those. So those were they said would be the two focus areas of the peer review. The Department of Education right now is putting a focus on making sure, and I think this is a place that, as a state, that we're doing a good job, but making sure that students have flexible and multiple pathways for success in either college or career, putting emphasis on industry certifications, micro degrees, apprenticeships, those sorts of things. So that was a focus there. And the School Safety Commission at the federal level should have a final report by the end of the year.
Super. That's a lot of stuff there. Any questions? Okay. On the NASB front, the annual meeting is coming up in October. I know Ms. Newton has a conflict and can't attend this time. I will be there. Doug asked me if I could get a head count of others who plan to go to NASB. Anyone else? Dr. Moore, anybody? Okay. All right, so I will give him a head count, which is one. Next up is special education.
Yes, we have a new director. If you'll look in your agenda yesterday under newly employed, you can find out who that is. I haven't had an opportunity to meet him yet, but I did send word that if he wanted to send me an email like Ms. Kaufman does, that's very helpful in a very concise way. If anything needs to be, or you all have any specific questions, if you'll let me have that, then I'll bring that. But otherwise, we're welcome him and glad to have him on board.
Great, super. And then, not on the list, it'll be on the list moving forward. Mr. Williamson, do you have anything on, have you had a chance? So, okay.
I can say that I spoke to Director Mike Preston and told him what we would like to do, and he's open to it. It's just a matter of getting that first meeting scheduled with him and the appropriate members of his team.
Okay. Well, I will get it on the list, and then we'll, whenever that time comes, we will look forward to hearing from you on that issue, on Arkansas Industrial Economic Development Commission liaison work. All right. Is there any other work? Feels like we've done a lot of good hard work over the last day and a half. Is there any new business to come before us? And I assume we have no public comment. No one signed in today. Then I will, Ms. Kaufman, come on up.
Just to provide the latest update. We have closed all of our corrections windows for data. Dr. Arolo's office has delivered the data to Arjit's team. They are in the process of loading that into private reports. The private reports we are anticipating right this minute to be ready to release to the school districts next Friday afternoon. So and then we'll have a public or a private review. So the school districts will go in and review those reports privately just to check, to make sure all the tables of data went into the right places on the reports. And once that review is over, then we'll go in and make any corrections that need to be made, and then the reports will be made to the public. So we're still anticipating first half of October, but bear with us.
Okay.
Accuracy is the most important part.
Indeed, indeed.
And while she's there, I want to compliment both her and Ms. Smith. Y'all may or may not remember, they have a technical advisory committee, which is experts that come from around the nation and meet with them periodically to look at the overall plan from a 30,000 view from and using their expertise. And they are always so complimentary of the fact that they, Ms. Smith and her team and Ms. Kaufman and her team want them to be what they call critical friends. I want to tell you what it is you're doing that's good, what you can do that would make it better, and they're looking 3 and 5 years out. They're not looking like at tomorrow, and so much of what those committees find is people that just want you to rubber stamp it and okay, you're good to go. But the committee is good, but they are so complimentary of the people from ADE that come to those meetings and how receptive they are to their suggestions.
Excellent. All right. Anything else? All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right. Motion by Ms. Dean, second by Ms. Chambers. Safe travels, everyone.